Good evening everyone, welcome to Tibet This Week, a weekly feature in English that provides a preview of this week's news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama confers historic Geshe-ma degree to 20 Tibetan Buddhist nuns. Tibet is not a part of China, but middle way remains a viable solution. CTA releases a book with the title. Scholars discuss Tibet's past, present and future at Department of Information and International Relations Symposium. Japanese lawmakers announce formation of all-party Japanese parliamentary group for Tibet. European Parliament passes resolution on Larungkhar. Sikyong interacts with leading mainstream media in India. On Thursday this week, Tibetan spiritual leader His Holiness the Dalai Lama conferred Geshe-ma degree to 20 Tibetan Buddhist nuns on the occasion of 600th founding anniversary of the Debong Monastery in Tibet. The ceremony was held at Debong Monastery in South India. Geshe-ma is the highest academic degree awarded to a nun in Tibetan Buddhism and is conferred after at least 21 years of rigorous study of 5 main Buddhist texts combined with a regular session of prayers and recitation. At the ceremony, His Holiness said,
secular ethics universal ethics
Tibetan political leader Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Sengye said His Holiness the Dalai Lama is instrumental in making possible the historic conferment of Geshe-ma degree to the Tibetan Buddhist nuns and that we owe him a debt of gratitude. Sikyong further said that women's leadership is taking prominence in the world. It is time for women to hold the mantle of leadership and this will ensure that the earth will be a more peaceful place. The conferment of Geshe-ma degree to Tibetan Buddhist nuns is a long-standing aspiration of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, which reflects a historic milestone as the degree is awarded only to the monks earlier. This historic development marks a new chapter in empowerment and education of Tibetan women, particularly in the spiritual sphere. The degree will open avenues of employment and opportunity to the nuns as it makes them equally eligible as monks to assume various leadership roles in the monastic and lay communities. On Saturday last week, the Central Tibetan Administration launched a trilingual report on the situation inside Tibet under the Chinese occupation titled Tibet is not a part of China, but middle way remains a viable solution at a high-profile event in New Delhi. Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Sengye, along with former Minister and Member of Parliament Shri Manishankar Iyer and former politician and veteran social activist Ms. Jaya Jetli, graced the book launch. Shri Manishankar Iyer said that the Tibetan proposal to resolve the Tibet issue conforms closely with India's own efforts to resolve its border dispute with China. Nehru's vision was in complete harmony with the current approaches proposed by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Mr. Iyer further said it is easier to be a pessimist than an optimist, but the fact that there is a dialogue, it gives the Tibetan movement a measure of stability and progress. The 107-page report directly addresses the many areas of concern, in particular the fundamental question on the historical status of Tibet, the reincarnation issue with regard to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the deteriorating environmental situation of the Tibetan plateau, and repression masquerading as urbanization and economic development inside Tibet. The report profoundly illustrates CTA's flagship policy, the middle way approach to resolve the issue of Tibet amicably with China. On Saturday last week, Department of Information and International Relations of the Central Tibetan Administration held a day-long symposium on Tibet's past, present and future, what's the way forward, at Constitution Club of India in New Delhi. The symposium featured 3 plenary sessions focusing on Tibet's historical past, the current situation inside Tibet, and the middle way policy of the Central Tibetan Administration to resolve the Tibet issue. The first session on Tibet's historical past featured Claude Arpe, historian and Tibetologist, and Jayadev Ranadev from Center for China Analysis and Strategy. Mr. Sonam Nobu Thapo, Secretary for Department of Information and International Relations, moderated the session. The second session on Tibet's present situation featured eminent environmental researcher Professor Brahmachalani from Center for Policy Research and Kate Saunders from the International Campaign for Tibet. The session was moderated by Ms. Kande Thomo. The final session on Tibet's future and the middle way approach featured Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Sengye and Professor Dibyesh Anand from the University of Westminster, London. Ms. Tenzin Dadun Sherling, Secretary for Department of Information and International Relations, moderated the session. Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Sengye spoke about the viability of the middle way approach as the realistic and strategic approach to resolving the issue of Tibet and said that if Tibet succeeds, India succeeds. The symposium brought together a host of thinkers, scholars, intellectuals and writers from across the academic spectrum. The symposium helped widen the horizon of intellectual discourse and dialogue on Tibet, its history, its present status and its future directions. On Wednesday last week, 82 lawmakers of Japan announced the formation of all-party Japanese Parliamentary Group for Tibet. Mr. Hakubun, member of House of Representatives and former Minister of Education, who is now the president of all-party Japanese Parliamentary Group for Tibet, thanked the Japanese parliamentarians for expressing strong support by hosting His Holiness the Dalai Lama during his recent visit to Japan. His Holiness the Dalai Lama on 16th November this year visited the Japanese parliament and interacted with 229 parliamentarians from the different political parties on the theme Tibet and Japan in Global World. He recalled that the idea to form this Tibet support group was mooted during His Holiness the Dalai Lama's visit to Japan around 5 years ago. Representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Japan, Mr. Lungtok, extended his profound gratitude on behalf of the Central Tibetan Administration and the Tibetan people to the members of Japanese Parliament for their efforts in supporting the Tibetan cause. The European Parliament on Thursday passed an urgent resolution on the cases of Larungar, the Tibetan Buddhist Academy, and Ilham Tohti at the plenary in Strasbourg, France. Out of 40 clauses of the resolution, 31 address the issue of Tibet and Larungar. It condemns the demolition of Larungar and calls on Chinese authorities to resume dialogue with the Tibetan representatives, which was ended by China in the year 2010. The Assistance Group for Tibet in the European Parliament has immensely contributed to the success of this resolution. The resolution is an outcome of the urgent and rigorous European Union advocacy by the Office of Tibet Brussels, and unlike other resolutions, that has been adopted by the Parliament in the view of urgency of the cases. The last European Parliament resolution on Tibet was passed in the year 2012. A day ahead of a crucial book released by the Department of Information and International Relations, Tibetan political leader Sikyong Dr. Lobsang Sengye interacted with leading mainstream media in the Indian capital. Reuters on December 16 published an article titled "Tibetan Leader Urges Trump to Confront China on Rights." Tribune on December 17th published an article titled "PM in Exile Appeals to Modi to Raise Tibet Issue." Economic Times on December 17th published an article titled "Tibet's PM in Exile Slams China for Opposing Dalai President Pranab Mukherjee Meet." On December 19th, Life Mint published an interview titled "Hopeful of an Early Meeting Between Trump, Dalai Lama, Lobsang Sengye." Subsequently, on December 20th, Times of India published an interview titled "India Should Make Tibet a Core Issue with China, Sengye." So much for this week. See you next Friday and have a good weekend.